So first of all, I think if you could tell everybody exactly who you are.
Sure. I'm a professor of medicine at West Virginia University School of Medicine. I am not doing this in my official role as a professor in the School of Medicine, but that is what I do. That's my daytime job. I do internal medicine. I'm a nephrologist, and I also do palliative care. And I teach, and I've taught medical ethics at the School of Medicine for over 25 years.
So powerful position that you're in. And so tell us why, because I've just met Dr. Moss over lunch, and it's a very brave thing what you're doing, because you could potentially lose your job.
Yes.
And you're fully aware of that.
Yes, but I'm concerned. My wife and I have counted, we know 12 children who have autism, including one of our neighbors, and both of his parents are physicians. And so physicians observe things, and he was meeting all his developmental milestones. He was doing great, and he got vaccinated. That night he developed a fever, then he developed seizures, and he's never been right since. And we know 12 stories that are essentially the same as this. And certainly if you look at the movie Vaxxed, or if you follow the stories that you've been publicizing, it is the same story, or a variant of the same story. So it's a real phenomenon, and it's one that we need to be concerned about. And if you read the records of the vaccine court, you can see that there are people who are being injured by vaccines. The flu vaccine is one that I'm particularly aware of, because it's given to so many people every year. And there are people getting Guillain-Barré syndrome and winning settlements from the vaccine court because they've gotten Guillain-Barré syndrome. And the flu, in the vast majority of people, is not a serious illness. And Guillain-Barré syndrome is a serious illness. And then the other thing that I just learned about is SIRVA. I had never heard of SIRVA, shoulder injury related to vaccine administration, which is another common thing that the vaccine court is compensating people for. So we've been...
So explain that. I don't think I've heard of that.
You haven't heard of that. So that's just something else where people have been injured by the vaccine administration itself, receiving the shot, and where they've been able to receive compensation for the injury. So the point is that although we may be told that the flu vaccine is safe, it may be true that some people can receive it without any injury at all, but people are being injured because the vaccine court is paying out several $200 million a year for the last 5 years on average per year, because of people who've been injured by vaccines. And the flu vaccine is currently, I think, the big one, although I've heard that the Gardasil vaccine is now becoming another very big one. So the concern is, are people properly informed? As somebody who teaches medical ethics, I'm very concerned that people receive informed consent, that they really know the benefits and the risks. And somebody at lunch, I was just talking to somebody at lunch who was telling me that his child got transverse myelitis after a vaccine, and he was not informed that is a risk. But if you read the package insert, that is a risk from these vaccines. These are major risks for what usually are mild illnesses. Measles is a mild illness. Chickenpox is a mild illness. When I was young, I went to a chickenpox party because my parents wanted me to get chickenpox so that I would have lifelong immunity. So unfortunately, we are having major injuries, like autism is a lifelong injury for something that itself would have been a mild illness. So I think it's a matter of informed consent, that people be told and then be able to decide whether they want it or not. Unfortunately, for children attending public school, it's mandatory. And so they don't get a choice, which isn't fair. And I've learned about the measles, mumps, rubella, that it can wear off, and then they have to do a booster before children go to elementary school. So it's something where it's not 100% effective. It's going to wear off. And the whole theory behind immunization is that we'll get herd immunity, and then everybody will be safe because so many people have been vaccinated. But if I come back to the flu vaccine and talk about herd immunity, if you go on the CDC website, for the last 5 years on average, the vaccine effectiveness was 43%. That means the majority of the people are not protected by the flu vaccine that they've received. And 3 years ago, the vaccine effectiveness was only 19%. That was the year when they just guessed wrong on what the prevalent strains would be during that flu season. And that means 80 out of 100 people were not immunized, were not protected when they received their flu vaccine. These are things that the American public doesn't know. And when we're told you have to have a mandatory vaccination, they're not told that there's a good chance it may not work, and even if it does work, it may only work for a very limited period of time. So these are things of major concern. And then the other thing I would like to say is that with every other drug that's out there, if it causes injury, you can go to court and you can sue the manufacturer and you can get a settlement if there's something that was caused by the drug. But with the vaccines, they're protected, and so the vaccine manufacturers don't have to worry about vaccine safety. So they have still things in the vaccines that can be harmful. They have things like mercury in some, aluminum in others, polysorbate 80, things that can cause infertility, things that there are viruses in some that are like from monkeys, and other viruses from other animals that are actually being injected into humans. So there are all sorts of things where we don't really know the long-term safety, and yet they're being done to people without sufficient data, sufficient safety studies to assure us that they will be safe. So for those reasons, and again, I'm coming at it the standpoint of being somebody who teaches medical ethics and is concerned about it, I don't think people should be forced to undergo something where we don't know for sure it's safe, or they haven't been given adequate consent. So those...
And it kills. I mean, I've just shown you pictures of
Yes.
my angel girls there, and you've seen the RIPs on the
Yes.
But how can they mandate or even offer something that kills people?
So I think that the public policymakers are not aware of all this data. I think there's been some pharmaceutical company pressure and certainly some influence, and there's a conflict of interest issue as well that's being raised against the CDC, because the CDC is the one who issues these guidelines for vaccine schedules. And I think just this past week, we read in the news that scientists at the CDC are concerned about the integrity of the research being conducted there. And again, so this just raises the concern that really, in this letter that was written by the CDC scientists, there really needs to be a cleaning of the house at the CDC, so that they have people who are really paying attention to conflicts of interest and making sure that all the research and all the data and all the recommendations coming from the CDC are valid and do keep in mind the safety of the public and prevent harm.
I think it's really sad that you fear losing your job to speak the truth. Why is it this way? Why is a doctor of your experience and integrity and everything else, why are you in this situation where you're a good Christian man, I know, so you're doing this for the right reasons, but why are you in that situation in the first place? Why should you be scared to speak out? Why is this happening?
I think it's the pervasive influence, I think, from starting with the pharmaceutical companies, I'm afraid, that's causing everybody to feel like they have to speak in favor of vaccination. I think we know of Bob Sears, a pediatrician, I think in California, who's facing losing his license because after he learned the types of things that I was discussing, said, well, I'm not going to recommend to my children in my practice that they be immunized. And now the California Board of Medicine is after his license. Unfortunately, physicians are afraid because organized medicine has been misled. And I think it's really because there's been misleading data from the CDC, has been misled into thinking that vaccinations are uniformly a good thing, when what you and I have just been discussing is they are not uniformly a good thing. They can cause serious harm, and people should be free to choose whether they want to be vaccinated or not.
And so what happens when you discuss with your colleagues your feelings on vaccines?
So unfortunately, they're not very open-minded. It's interesting. I was listening to somebody talk about psychological barriers, and there are just so many things that any one of us want to challenge every day, because living is hard enough without having to think about, well, maybe something I've been taught for decades is not right, and I have to rethink how I even approach a whole area of my life. And I think a lot of my colleagues are very well intentioned. They really care for patients. They want to do the right thing, but they just don't want to open up the can of worms, if you will, that would be involved in thinking, I've been recommending vaccinations to my patients and their families for decades, and now I'm finding out that maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. That's cognitive dissonance. That's a very hard thing to accept, and I think some people would just rather not go there, especially because as you and I have been discussing, you really have to dig beneath the surface to find the data, to find the facts that show that there are great dangers associated with vaccinations.
You need to know there's a lot of people here that are sending you love. Like, unbelievable. They're just so grateful that you're doing this. So that's number one, you need to know that. Now, if you do lose your job,
yes,
please let us know. And we'd like you to write a book.
Yes.
And we'd like you to be a speaker at all of our conferences. In fact, we're putting a panel together for next May for Autism One, a VAX panel. So if you're free, please will you be on that?
Well, it depends.
Let's see what happens first.
At least,
just so you know.
Yes, as of right now, I have a lot of speaking engagements next May, but I may not. Who knows?
You may not. Well, I hope we people like you. It's a little bit of justice for our children that were damaged.
Yes.
That come out and do this. It means so much to us because all of us here, the people that you're talking to now, we just don't want anybody else to suffer. And I was speaking to your wife. You have an amazing wife,
yes,
by the way.
Yes.
And she was telling me about your neighbour's child.
Yes.
And it's a really sad story.
Very sad. He has a severe case of autism.
Yeah, I mean, she was. We're going to get him some help. We know exactly what we're going to do, but you know, you're kind of living with it, and we really appreciate what you're doing, and for your grandchildren, for
right.
the future,
absolutely,
generations. Now, is there anything else that you want to tell us? I know your wife follows Periscope.
I'm hopeful. You know, I've been trying to talk to my colleagues because I have many colleagues who really are very conscientious, many physician colleagues who want to do the right thing and who just have not done the research in this area because honestly, I'm not an infectious disease doctor. I'm a kidney doctor and I do palliative care. But I am concerned in the last decade, I don't know if you've heard about it, the National Institute of Medicine, the Institute of Medicine has recommended that we do patient-centered care. The patient's values and preferences should drive the type of treatment that we provide to them. And part of patient-centered care is really finding out what's important to the patient. And you find that out by talking to the patient and then listening to the patient. And I think that where we've gone with vaccinations and not listening to all these parents who are telling these stories, we've ceased to be doing, when we're mandating something and where we have safety concerns about it, we're certainly not listening and we're not doing good patient-centered care. So my hope is as we go more and more in this direction in the practice of medicine, we will start listening and we will start paying attention, and that healthcare will be changed, will be improved as a result of really what should be a collaboration between the physicians and their patients and their families.
I have to tell you, Periscope peeps, the first time that we had a proper conversation, I announced to the table, stay away from paediatricians and doctors, stay right away. And then he leant forward and said, hi, just so you know, I am a doctor. And that's pretty much how we met.
Correct.